My name is Sam Preston. Standing at the entrance of their walk-in closet, my hands buried in the pockets of his well-worn slacks, I silently watched my wife prepare for yet another night out. Across the room, Jennifer's my wife reflection in the vanity mirror was calm and composed, her practiced hand applying crimson lipstick with the precision of an artist. I had spent 2 decades as a detective with the Chicago PD, including a stint in special ops, and my instincts rarely failed me. Those instincts were now tying my stomach into knots as I took in the small, disconcerting changes in Jennifer's behavior over the last few months. Jennifer, or Jen, as I have always called her, had always been a force to be reckoned with. Her ambition had captivated me from the start, but lately, her drive felt different. There was an air of detachment, almost secrecy, about her that was impossible to ignore. "Another late night at the office?" I asked, keeping his tone light but inquisitive. Jen's reflection didn't falter, but her eyes avoided me in the mirror as she adjusted her pearl earrings, ones I have bought her for their anniversary 3 years prior. "The grant proposal isn't going to finish itself," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of the clipped tone I have noticed creeping into our conversations recently. She reached for her signature perfume, the scent she'd worn since the day we met at that charity gala 15 years ago. "Don't wait up," she added without looking at me. My eyes narrowed slightly as she stood and smoothed the sleek fabric of a black designer dress I didn't recognize. It looked expensive, far beyond anything I would have expected her to buy before. Her wardrobe had undergone a quiet transformation in the past months. Outfits that had always been pricey were now unmistakably extravagant, adorned with luxury labels I could barely pronounce. Her jewelry sparkled brighter, her heels climbed higher, and her handbags now bore the names of elite fashion houses. "Work's keeping you pretty busy these days," I observed, stepping aside as she brushed past me. I caught a faint whiff of something unfamiliar beneath her usual perfume, a subtle, distinctly masculine cologne. "It comes with the territory," Jen replied, her tone brisk as her heels clicked against the newly refinished hardwood floors. "I can't handle high-profile accounts and expect a 9-to-5 schedule." I didn't miss the way her fingers danced nervously over her phone as she descended the staircase. Her perfectly manicured nails typed out rapid messages, illuminated by the soft glow of the screen. The darker makeup she'd been wearing lately only heightened my unease. I felt less professional and more provocative. "Is Paul Delaney going to be there tonight?" I asked casually as she gathered her things. I referred to the development firm's biggest client, someone Jen frequently mentioned. She paused for the briefest of moments, a hesitation so subtle most people wouldn't have noticed it. "No, he's in Paris for the week. It'll just be the board and the finance team." She tucked her phone into a brand-new leather tote bag that screamed exclusivity. "Right," I muttered, my experience in interrogations telling me there was more to her story. The diamonds on her necklace, a piece I have never seen before, glittered in the hallway light as she adjusted her collar. "Drive safe," I called as she stepped out into the rain. "The roads are slick." For a fleeting moment, her polished facade cracked, and guilt flashed across her face. She hesitated, reaching to straighten my tie, a gesture that had once been a warm habit of us. "Don't overwork yourself, Sam. That cold case can wait," she said. I watched as she walked to the sleek SUV she'd recently leased, a model far above what they'd usually consider. She glanced over her shoulder before climbing in, her behavior reminding me of the cautiousness I have often seen in surveillance suspects. As her taillights disappeared into the rain-soaked night, I closed the door and headed to my office. I opened my laptop, accessing the GPS tracking program I have installed on her car weeks ago when my suspicions began to solidify. I stared at the moving dot on the screen. Instead of heading toward the downtown financial district where her office was located, the SUV was veering into the upscale Back Bay neighborhood. My jaw tightened. My hand reached for my phone, dialing a number I haven't used in a while. After a few rings, a familiar voice answered. "Preston here. What's up?" "Eva," I said, addressing my former partner and longtime confidant. "Coffee tomorrow?" There was a pause before Eva replied, her sharp instincts clearly picking up on his tone. "Sure. What's going on, Sam?" "I just need your take on something," I said, my voice careful. Something delicate. Dorchester Diner? 7 sharp? Perfect. I hung up, then leaned back in my chair. My gut told him the road ahead wasn't just going to be about a suspicious wife. It was going to be about uncovering something much bigger and far more dangerous. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the window as I made a decision. Whatever truth awaited me, I would find it. It was nearing midnight, and the precinct's parking garage was desolate. Most of the day's shift had clocked out long ago, leaving only the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional rumble of distant traffic to break the silence. Sam Preston's footsteps echoed as he approached his SUV, the weight of the case files in his briefcase mirroring the heaviness in his mind. A second set of footsteps made him pause mid-stride. His hand instinctively moved toward the concealed holster beneath his jacket. Detective Preston? The voice was female, shaky and coming from the shadow of a concrete pillar. I turned cautiously, his body tense, ready for action. A young woman stepped into the harsh glow of the overhead lights. She couldn't have been more than 25, her professional attire rumpled and her face pale with anxiety. Her trembling hands were clasped tightly in front of her. "I'm Bethany Porter," she began, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Mr. Paul Delaney, assistant. Please, I need to talk to you." My sharp eyes studied her. Dark circles underscored her weary eyes, and she shifted her weight as though every nerve in her body was on edge. "Kind of late for a visit, miss," I replied evenly, his voice low. "This isn't a social call," Bethany said, her words barely above a whisper. She reached into her bag, prompting my hand to hover near my weapon, but she only pulled out a small USB drive. "Mr. Delaney isn't who he says he is. Neither is your wife. They're planning something dangerous." I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I didn't immediately reach for the drive. Why come to me? Why not go to the FBI or the SEC? Bethany let out a hollow, bitter laugh. "Do you think I haven't tried? Paul has connections, powerful ones. Complaints vanish. Files disappear. And witnesses," her voice faltered, "witnesses have accidents." Somewhere in the garage, an engine roared to life, startling Bethany. She flinched visibly, her hand jerking the USB drive forward. "Everything's on here," she pleaded. "But be careful. They monitor everything." I took the drive slowly, noting how her hand recoiled as though the transfer had burned her. "How did you get this information?" "I'm his assistant. I see everything, every meeting, every email, every shady deal. Paul thinks I'm just a dumb secretary who doesn't know what I'm looking at. But I've been documenting it all." Her voice cracked as she spoke, her composure unraveling. "The charity meetings your wife attends? They're cover-ups. It's not about real estate. Offshore accounts, shell companies, people vanishing without a trace. It's all connected." A metallic clang echoed from deeper in the garage, and Bethany flinched again. I instinctively stepped forward to steady her, but she shrank back. "Miss Porter," he said gently, his voice the same calming tone he used with frightened witnesses, "come back to the station with me. We can take your statement, make sure you're protected." "No." Bethany's voice reverberated against the concrete walls. "No reports. No police. Nothing they can trace." She inhaled sharply, fighting to regain control. "Just look at what's on the drive, but not at home or the station. They'll know." I slipped the drive into my pocket, my mind racing. "How do I reach you if I need more information?" "You can't." Bethany was already backing into the shadows, her voice trembling. "I've stayed too long already. They'll notice I'm gone." She turned to leave, but hesitated. "Detective Preston, be careful who you trust, especially the people closest to you." Before I could reply, Bethany vanished into the darkness. Her hurried footsteps faded, leaving the garage eerily silent. The USB drive in my pocket felt heavier than it should, a ticking time bomb that threatened to upend everything I thought he knew. Making a snap decision, I climbed into my SUV, locking the doors as I scanned the garage for any sign of movement. My fingers flew over my phone screen. "Need secure location, tech support, off the books." Eva's reply came quickly. "My place. 1 hour. Bring coffee." I exited the garage, taking a deliberately convoluted route home. Bethany's words about trust echoed in my head as I navigated through the wet streets of Boston. At home, I found a note on the kitchen counter in Jin's looping handwriting. Went to bed early. Big presentation tomorrow. The house was silent, but I moved quietly out of habit. Upstairs, Jin lay in bed, her breathing even. The faint scent of her perfume mingled with a woodsy cologne. For a moment, I stood in the doorway, memories of better times clouding my judgment. Bethany's warning returned to me with chilling clarity. Back in my car, I swapped my personal phone for an old burner from my undercover days. It took an hour of careful driving to reach Eva's house, ensuring I wasn't followed. Eva greeted me at the door, ushering me into her home office where an encrypted laptop awaited. She took the USB drive, her expression grim. "You sure about this?" she asked, giving me a last out. "Once we see what's on here, there's no going back." I thought of the months of suspicion, of Jin's evasive answers and Bethany's trembling hands. "Do it." Eva nodded, inserting the drive. The files began decrypting, and as the first document opened, I felt my blood run cold. What lay before us wasn't just infidelity or shady business dealings. It was a sprawling web of corruption and danger, far beyond what I had imagined. The investigation had officially crossed a line, and I knew there was no return. "I need to get Jin out of this," I said, my voice heavy with resolve. "No matter what she's done, she's still my wife." Eva, my former partner, joined me at the window of the sleek office overlooking Boston's skyline. "It's not that simple, Sam," she replied gravely. "Delaney operation is like a cancer. It's spread too far into the real estate market. Walking away won't work. They'll just find another way to eliminate both of us." I turned to face her, jaw clenched. "Then we take them all down." A wolfish grin spread across Eva's face, the same one I remembered from our combat days. "Now that's the Sam Preston I know," Eva said, striding back to my desk. I pressed a button on my phone. "Sarah, cancel all my meetings for today, and bring me everything we have on the Delaney development and its security protocols." 4 hours, we pored over blueprints, security schedules, and financial records. Resources were impressive, including satellite images, detailed building schematics, and personnel files for everyone in Delaney organization, from guards to executives. "He has a weakness," Eva finally said, pointing to a map of Boston's financial district. "Delaney's paranoid but arrogant. He thinks his FSB training makes him untouchable, which is why he operates so openly under." I leaned over the map, my mind racing. We use that arrogance against him. Let him believe his plan is working. Make him comfortable. Eva nodded, approval evident. Classic counterintelligence. Feed him the narrative he expects while we build our case. I opened another file. "I've got contacts in federal agencies. They've been trying to nail Delaney for years, but never had enough evidence. Until now." I patted the USB drive in my pocket. "Until now." "Exactly," Eva confirmed. "But one misstep, and both you and Jin could disappear without a trace." I glanced at my phone. Another text from Jin. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." The pieces were falling into place. The designer clothes, the mysterious meetings, the masculine cologne. It wasn't an affair. Jin was being cornered, manipulated by a professional predator. "What's our first move?" I asked, determination unwavering. Eva spread out an organizational chart of Petrov's network. "We let him think he's winning. Keep up appearances while we collect every shred of evidence. When the time comes, we'll take the whole operation down in one decisive blow." I nodded, though my thoughts drifted to Jin. Was she sitting in some luxury hotel right now, thinking she was navigating Delaney's game while, in truth, she was being played? "One more thing," Eva added, her tone deadly serious. "From this moment on, trust no one outside this room. Delaney has people everywhere, law enforcement, city hall, maybe even federal agencies. We keep this airtight." I thought of Bethany Porter's shaking hands as she handed over the USB drive. "Understood," I said. Eva walked to a hidden wall safe, retrieving several burner phones and encrypted flash drives. She handed one to me. "Welcome to the Shadow War, my friend. Let's get to work." The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in deception. Working with Eva, I orchestrated an elaborate counter-operation. She funneled carefully crafted disinformation through Delaney's channels, giving the illusion that his plans were unfolding smoothly. Bethany's insider access became instrumental. Eva set up a secure command center in an abandoned warehouse on the city's outskirts. The space buzzed with surveillance monitors and data feeds, tracking every move of Delaney's network. Our friend just moved another $5 million through the Caymans, Eva reported, pointing to a digital map tracking financial flows. I studied the transactions on screen. He's consolidating, preparing to disappear. The door to the operations center opened, and a tall woman in her 50s entered. Madeline Walsh, a retired CIA operative, carried herself with the cool confidence of someone who had faced danger and won. Her severe bun and sharp eyes radiated no-nonsense authority. "You were right," Madeline said without preamble, dropping a thick file onto the table. Delaney's network is extensive, 12 cities, all using compromised real estate developers as fronts. I picked up the file, my stomach twisting as I flipped through its contents. "Your wife isn't the first, Sam," Madeline continued, "and she won't be the last unless we stop him." Eva leaned forward, analyzing the patterns on screen. Same MO every time. Target ambitious developers, compromise them, and use their businesses to launder money. Sometimes it's blackmail, Madeline added. Sometimes seduction. Sometimes financial manipulation. The endgame is always the same. My chest tightened as I thought of Jen. So, she's just another pawn. Not quite, Madeline said gently. Her ambition made her vulnerable, but she's made choices. Choices that go beyond simple manipulation. Before I could respond, an analyst burst into the room. "We've got movement. Paul just called an emergency board meeting for the Morrison development." We gathered around a screen showing live security footage. Jen entered the building, clad in a tailored Chanel suit, her trademark designer bag in hand. "Look at her body language," Madeline noted. "She's nervous. See how she keeps adjusting her collar." I recognized the tell immediately. Jen had always fiddled with her jewelry when anxious. Some habits never changed. The room fell silent as they listened to the meeting via a planted audio device. Paul's voice was smooth and deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I'm pleased to announce that all obstacles to our project have been resolved. We're ready for the final phase." The calm, businesslike tone made my skin crawl. They were discussing my murder like it was just another item on the agenda. "She's not saying much," Madeline observed. "She knows what's coming," I said, my voice tight. As the meeting ended, they watched Paul and Jen leave the building together, heading for their usual hotel. But something was different this time. "Check his security detail," Eva said, pointing to the screen. "Two new faces. Those guys are Spetsnaz. Heavy hitters. They're preparing to make their move," Madeline said grimly. I straightened. "We stay the course. Keep them convinced their plan is working. Meanwhile, we find the evidence to tie Paul to his crimes." Eva pulled up another screen of financial transactions. "If we can link these patterns across all 12 cities, we'll have a solid RICO case." Madeline nodded. "But we need something definitive, proof of Paul's identity and the full scope of the operation." I turned to Eva. "Those new guys, can we flip them?" Eva's grin was razor sharp. "Already on it. One's got a gambling problem. The other has family in Brighton Beach who owe some dangerous people money." "Careful," Madeline warned. "Push too hard, and Paul will smell a trap." "We don't push," I said firmly. "We let them think they're in control." The room fell quiet as the weight of our mission settled over us. One mistake could cost lives. "There's something else," Madeline said softly, pulling up a file. "We've been digging deeper into Jen's involvement. She's not just a victim, Sam. The evidence suggests she's been actively complicit for longer than we thought." I felt the floor drop beneath him. I have clung to the hope that Jen was simply a pawn, but the truth was becoming harder to deny. "Show me," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. As the files loaded on screen, I braced myself. The hardest truths, I realized, were the ones that hit closest to home. They were skilled, but they underestimated their target. The first sign something was wrong came when the parking garage lights flickered. The three men instantly moved into defensive positions, weapons at the ready. "But I have already relocated." Years of combat experience had taught me that psychological warfare was just as effective as brute force. "Something's off," one of the men muttered in accented English. "Split up. Find him," another ordered. I allowed myself a grim smile as they played directly into my hands. I have chosen this garage for a reason. Every shadow, every blind corner, every acoustic quirk worked in my favor. I moved silently through the labyrinth of concrete, my senses tuned to their every move. The first operator went down without a sound. I used the man's momentum against him, locking him in a chokehold until he slumped unconscious. Quickly and efficiently, I zip-tied the man's hands and feet before vanishing into the shadows again. The second was more cautious, moving slower and scanning his surroundings with precision. But even his training was no match for the years I have spent honing my craft. I neutralized him with brutal efficiency, ensuring no sound escaped to alert the others. The third operator was the real challenge. When his companions failed to check in, he knew something was wrong. His weapon was drawn, his eyes systematically sweeping the garage for any sign of movement. But he made one critical error. He was looking for a detective, not a former Special Forces operative. The fight was short but fierce. I took a glancing blow to his ribs, but ended it with a decisive strike that left the final operator unconscious. Breathing heavily, I secured the man and began rifling through their phones. What I found made my blood run cold. Text messages, emails, and encrypted communications laid bare the full scope of Delaney's operation. Even worse, they confirmed something I have been desperate to avoid admitting. Jen wasn't just a pawn. She was complicit. One message stood out above the rest. Target's routine confirmed. Wife says pension and insurance policies updated last month. Clean hit means everything transfers to her. She's ready to play grieving widow. I sank against a concrete pillar, the blue light of the phone illuminating my face as I processed the betrayal. I have hoped, even prayed, that Jen was being manipulated, coerced into her actions. But the evidence was damning. She had conspired to have me killed. The designer clothes, the late meetings, the changes in her demeanor. It wasn't just about money laundering. It had been about setting me up for murder, with her reaping the financial rewards. The sound of distant sirens snapped I out of my thoughts. I quickly photographed the incriminating evidence, then placed an anonymous call to report suspicious activity in the garage. By the time the police arrived, I would be long gone. As I drove into the rainy Boston night, my mind churned. The garage encounter had provided me with crucial evidence, but it also forced me to confront the unbearable truth about my marriage. The safe house was a nondescript walk-up in Somerville, carefully chosen to avoid any connections to our usual networks. I parked 3 blocks away, approaching on foot and checking my surroundings for tails. Eva opened the door, ushering me into the makeshift operations center. Her laptop was already humming on the kitchen table. Madeline was there too, their faces lit by the glow of surveillance monitors displaying streams of data. "The phones?" Eva asked, extending her hand. I handed them over, along with my own phone containing photos of the key messages. "It's worse than we thought," I said, my voice tight. Jen wasn't just involved. She's been actively planning this. Eva plugged in the devices, her eyes widening as the data loaded. "My God, Sam." Eva leaned over her shoulder, my expression dark as I scanned the messages. Classic sociopath behavior. She's been setting this up for months, maybe years. Madeline pulled up financial records on another screen. These life insurance adjustments aligned perfectly with her timeline. This wasn't impulsive, it was methodical. I paced the cramped kitchen, my ribs aching from the fight. All this time, I thought Paul was manipulating her. I thought she was a victim. He clenched his fists. "But she's been a willing participant from the start." Madeline's voice was quiet. "Sometimes, the people we think we know best are the ones who surprise us the most." The room fell silent as Eva extracted more data from the phones. Finally, she looked up. "We've got enough to take down the entire network, financial records, operational details, contact lists across all 12 cities. But if we move too soon, they'll scatter," Eva warned. "They'll expect those men to report back," I said, his tone steady despite the storm raging inside me. "When they don't, We have maybe 12 hours before they realize something's wrong. Less if they have check-in protocols, Eva added. One of the phones buzzed with an incoming message. Everyone froze as Eva pulled it up. It was from Jin. Is it done? Need confirmation for the next phase. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The clinical detachment in her words, casually asking about my murder, made the betrayal even more chilling. We can use this, Madeline said, her CIA instincts kicking in. String them along. Make them think the plan is on track. Eva nodded. But we need to move fast. If they suspect anything, it's over. I stared at the message, memories of my life with Jen flashing through my mind. How long had she been planning my death? How much of their life together had been real? Sam, Eva said gently, what do you want to do? I straightened, shoving my emotions aside. We use their own plan against them. Let them think everything's going exactly as they want. But this time, we're pulling the strings. The team nodded in agreement. This wasn't about my marriage anymore. It was about dismantling a criminal empire that had destroyed lives across the country. Surveillance feeds from the penthouse streamed onto the monitors. Eva adjusted the audio, and team confirmed all equipment was in place. On the screen, the elevator doors opened, revealing Jen and Paul. Everything is proceeding as planned, Paul said, his Russian accent now unmistakable. He shrugged off his tailored jacket and dropped it onto a chair. The police found exactly what we wanted them to find. Jen poured champagne, her hands steady. The diamonds at her throat sparkled under the light. I recognized them as the ones I have given her for their anniversary. They're not looking too closely, she said, her voice calm. Just another failed robbery in a parking garage. My stomach churned as I watched her raise her glass in a mock toast. You should have seen his face, Paul laughed. The great detective brought down by common thugs. Delicious irony. Eva placed a comforting hand on my arm, but I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Jen smiled coldly. He never appreciated what I was capable of. Now, everything he had is mine. The moment of truth was near. I stood, my jaw set. Send the confirmation, I ordered Eva. Paul's phone buzzed moments later. His satisfied grin said it all. It's done, he announced to Jen. Jen raised her glass again, her red lipstick leaving a perfect mark on the rim. To new beginnings. My voice was low and firm as I watched her on the screen. To the end. The trap was set. To my dear, departed husband, Jen said, raising her glass. Her tone was mockingly sweet. He should have stuck to solving petty crimes instead of asking questions about the Morrison development. Your performance is improving, Paul praised, his voice cool and measured. But remember, when you speak of him, let grief color your words. A slight catch in your voice, a tremor. It will sell the act. Over the next few hours, I and our team watched through the surveillance feed as Paul and Jen refined their macabre strategy. They planned everything, from press statements to how they would funnel my death benefits into their next ventures. Each casual mention of my murder, each calculated step to profit from my death, drove the knife of betrayal deeper into my chest. Around midnight, Paul returned to his penthouse, connected by a private skybridge. Jen stayed behind, staring out at the city lights with a champagne flute in hand. For a fleeting moment, her polished mask slipped, and I caught a glimpse of the raw ambition that truly drove her. She wasn't just an accessory to Paul's schemes. She was reveling in them. All units in position, Eva's voice came through my earpiece. Waiting for your command. I watched as Jen practiced her grieving widow act in the window's reflection, perfecting her expression for the cameras. Let them enjoy their celebration, I said quietly. Tomorrow, we give them a performance they'll never forget. Eva nodded, already coordinating with federal teams for the massive operation planned for the morning. On the surveillance feed, Jen raised her glass in a private toast to her reflection. The stage was set, but she had no idea what act was about to unfold. The first light of dawn painted Boston's skyline in shades of gold and rose. In a command center brimming with tension, Eva oversaw the final preparations for simultaneous raids across the country. Status report, she called out, her voice calm but firm as multiple channels buzzed with updates. Team Alpha in position at the penthouse. Team Bravo covering the skybridge. Team Charlie securing the garage exits. Financial teams standing by to freeze accounts. Eva's voice cut through the chatter. Primary target is on the move. Paul just left his penthouse, heading for the skybridge. I watched on the surveillance feed as Paul, flanked by his security detail, moved between buildings. The evidence from the hitman's phones had given the team everything they needed: guard rotations, security protocols, even elevator codes. Target is entering the primary location, Eva confirmed. Moving to Phase 2. On screen, Paul entered Jen's penthouse. She was dressed for the occasion, clad in a black designer suit, her makeup perfect, and her red-rimmed eyes a product of expertly applied irritants rather than genuine tears. My stomach churned as I watched her rehearse her eulogy in front of a mirror. "He was everything to me," she murmured, placing a hand over her heart. "A dedicated officer. A loving husband. I still can't believe he's gone," said Jen. "Excellent delivery," Paul said approvingly, sipping his coffee. "The press will eat it up. Have you prepared your statement about the charity foundation in his memory?" Paul said. Jen's smile was predatory. "Of course. Nothing opens checkbooks like a murdered cop's widow. We'll move millions through it in months." The casual way they discussed turning my death into a money laundering front solidified my resolve. "All teams, execute," I ordered. The operation unfolded like clockwork. Across the country, federal agents raided offices, seized documents, and arrested key players in Paul's network. Every shell company, every hidden account, every compromised property was hit simultaneously. In Jen's penthouse, she was adjusting her jewelry when the breaching charges shattered the calm. Eva teams stormed in, their movements precise and unyielding. Federal agents. Everyone on the ground. Paul reacted instantly, reaching for a hidden weapon, but Eva operators were faster. Within seconds, he was disarmed and restrained. "It's over, Paul," Eva said, her tone steely. "Your entire organization is being dismantled as we speak." Jen's mask cracked at last, her carefully crafted grief giving way to raw fury. "Eva," she hissed, her voice dripping with disbelief. "That means—" "Yes, Mrs. Preston," Eva said, stepping into the room with her federal badge displayed. "Your husband sends his regards." The shock on Jen's face was palpable, as the realization of her unraveling plan dawned. My voice came through the tactical speakers. "Practicing your lines, Jen? Save them for the jury." Paul made one last desperate attempt, diving for a panic room. But Eva team had already disabled its security. "Target secured," came the final report. "Secondary target in custody." Jen and Paul were both restrained as agents cataloged the evidence. The hitman's phones had provided everything needed for airtight RICO charges. As Jen was led past Eva, her voice was hollow. "The Morrison development?" "Seized," Eva replied coldly, "along with every other property in Paul's network. And thanks to your murder plot, we have all the proof we need." Across the country, similar scenes played out. Chicago, Miami, Seattle, Dallas, every location had been neutralized. Eva approached me, who had been monitoring the raid. "Ready to make your appearance?" I nodded, adjusting his tie. It was time to face the woman who had plotted my death. 6 months later, the federal courthouse buzzed with activity. The trial had captivated the nation. International money laundering ring exposed. Real estate empire falls. Detective uncovers wife's murder plot. I sat in the witness box, delivering his final testimony. The evidence had been overwhelming: financial records, surveillance footage, intercepted communications. But the prosecution wanted the trial's last words to come from me. "Detective Preston," the prosecutor began, "can you describe the moment you realized your wife's true role in this conspiracy?" My eyes met Jen's across the courtroom. She sat at the defense table, her once glamorous appearance reduced to prison garb. "The hardest part," I said, my voice steady, "wasn't discovering the murder plot. It was realizing that every moment of our 15-year marriage had been a lie. Every anniversary dinner, every holiday, every quiet Sunday. All of it was just preparation for my elimination." Photos appeared on the courtroom screens. Images of Jen rehearsing her grieving widow act, laughing with Paul, celebrating my supposed death. "The worst crime here," I continued, "wasn't the money laundering or the murder plot. It was the betrayal of trust, not just mine, but of every citizen who believes in the integrity of our system. In a cold, fluorescent-lit room at the correctional facility, Jen sat across from a prison psychologist conducting a study on white-collar criminals. "How do you feel about your role in Paul's organization now?" the doctor asked. Jen's laugh was bitter. "I thought I was using him to get what I wanted. Turns out, he was using me from the start." Meanwhile, in Boston's financial district, Eva, now director of the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force, oversaw new initiatives inspired by the Paul case. "Across the country, I have found peace. My private investigation firm in Colorado thrived, my expertise sought after by corporations determined to avoid similar schemes. My book, Trust But Verify, had become essential reading in law enforcement circles." As I sipped his coffee, he received an email from Eva. "Bethany just got a new identity through witness protection. She says thanks." I smiled. Life had come full circle, and the light at the end of the darkness was brighter than ever.